Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome to the James Drew Show after a week off. You may have noticed a steadily growing beard from episode one. I call it a writer's beard. I'm working on a book that I've actually been working on for quite a while called Colony Wars. It's about what would what life would be like and the conflicts that it would create should we start reaching out into deep space and colonizing worlds like Mars, um, uh, Venus, even Mercury, and the moons of the gas planets. Now, given that we're the only planet capable of even remotely supporting life, we more than sufficiently do. Obviously, Mother Nature's very good to us, um, much better to us than we are to her. But um, the other three rocky planets, which would be the most likely that we could colonize, so good aren't so good to anything. Mars is Mars and the Moon are basically just a rock in space. The Moon has no atmosphere. Mars has a very thin atmosphere with only 1% the air pressure of Earth at sea level, um, and much above sea level, just no real air pressure, and there's no oxygen whatsoever. Where still there's no magnetosphere, which means that uh, there's no protection from the sun. Um, that problem is solvable. Now Venus, on the other hand, is exactly the opposite. It's extremely hot. Um, the atmospheric pressure, if and it's the air is filled with extremely corrosive acid that it just dissolves anything we send into it. If the atmospheric pressure doesn't crush it, it usually just gets eaten alive. And usually the corrosive acid eats it up enough to where it gets crushed that much quicker from the lack of structural integrity. So, um, I'll be discussing how to make that world and Mars much more inhabitable. The only thing you can really do with the moon is pressure domes. That's never going to be anything but set underneath an artificial structure. Um, and it has no real electromagnetic sphere, and it can't hold atmosphere as it's only 15% as heavy as Earth, so it's never going to hold anything like an atmosphere. Mars. So what I'll be discussing is the how, the what, the where, the why, and the when. The how. The first would be, I guess, would be why. Why should we bother to colonize such shitholes? For lack of a better word, this is not somewhere you want to go. This is not somewhere you would really have to pitch this to convince somebody to live. Um, I guess the first reason we would even have to send somebody out there is, well, obviously because that's what we do. We send people where we've never gone before. We establish this potential. I'm sure there's valuable resources on a globe even half the size of Earth. There's water. I'm sure there's valuable metals. There are things that would make it relatively easy to eventually turn that into something of a livable world. America was fairly hostile when we came to it. It took us a few centuries to tame it, and the air was breathable. Um, the pro of colonizing such a hostile world is that's the only thing that's hostile about it is the planet itself. We're not going to be going up there and contending with things that are already living there because there's nothing else living there. It's ours. We get to reset. We get a chance to start again. Let's face it, the world's getting more and more crowded. Um, there's less and less people with something to do. Unfortunately, the first thing you'll find about colonizing an entire new planet is 100% unemployment. You're not sending anybody up there without anything to do. Unemployment's not going to be an issue until we start just making babies. And in a situation like that, it's going to be centuries before that's going to be an issue, where the next generation has to find work, because let's face it, there's no better workforce than your own blood, especially on the frontier. That's always been the case. Even today, farmers generally just put their own blood to work until or their kid decides they want something else. Then they have to. It would be centuries before unemployment on that world will become a problem. I mean, there's the potential for putting our most delinquent people to work and to use, giving them another shot, giving humanity another shot, a chance to do things differently. We don't have to carry our sins throughout the solar system. We don't have to continue in capitalism, communism, socialism. We can come up with something new. And there's nothing anybody back here that can do about it, because it's at the closest 13 million miles away. An email takes 20 minutes at the when Mars and Earth are at their closest to go back and forth. And if you study history, our greatest financial and social technological advancements came from the colonization of the United States. Not just the initial 13 colonies, but when we started settling and conquering the West, when we started building the railroad and bridges across the Mississippi River, when we started taming the continental United States, is when our economy took off, when our economy and our people were at their greatest, when we were doing awesome things, taming an entire world, making it our own, which is something that we've done and we've almost taken for granted on a world where there is plenty of air, there's plenty of food, there's plenty of animals to consume. I mean, that in and of itself, establishing the balance between animal and vegetation, would be an enormous task. Because let's face it, we don't want to live under pressure domes any longer than we have to. So, how do we do that? Well, the first step is obviously to do what we're planning to do and start out in a bunch of really big campers, interplanetary campers set on the ground, set up greenhouses, set up animal farms, begin the cycle of life in a very small space, let things live and die. One of the things that really fascinates me about colonizing an alien world is that some animals, even people, will make their greatest contribution with death, because the Martian ground is dead. There's no water. You drink, you pee. It goes right into the ground. It goes right into the system. It gets filtered. Everything will go towards making Mars a little more habitable every day. I don't even think most people even think about it or realize it. So step one, it is important to thaw the ice caps. Yes, we need to get the water flowing on Mars. So that means you hit the ice caps a few times. You play a interplanetary game of pool with the asteroid belt until they start falling into Mars. Get it headed straight for, and we're good at math. We're going to figure out exactly what trajectory to hit the ice caps with, have have a nice little explosion over the poles, and get that ice dripping. The next step, the most important step, because water, ice, none of that's going to matter if we don't have an electromagnetic field, is to restart the planet's core. All day, every day. That is the most important. We need tectonic movement on that son of a bitch. So the trick will be to hit the fault lines with meteors or a simple nuclear bomb. I don't care. Just carry bombs up there, put them in the fault lines, and get that sucker moving. The most important thing about that is, as we start building an oxygen atmosphere or any kind of atmosphere, we need to get air sticking to the planet. We need air pressure, and then once we have enough air pressure, we simply set down plants. We've got enough heat and air pressure. We set down plants on the planet, and we just start pouring oxygen into the atmosphere. I think within a couple of centuries we would have an atmosphere breathable for human life. They say 1,000 years. No, you get that electromagnetic sphere built up, and the sky is the limit. Now, Venus. How's that going to happen on Venus? Well, as I mentioned, the air pressure on Venus is much, 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 much heavier than on Earth. So what do we do about that? Well, we eliminate the air. How do we do that? Well, I mentioned that it's laced with an extremely corrosive acid. Well, what's the opposite of an acid? A base. Well, I guess the trick would be to take a liquid base, pour it into a comet, fill it with almost ready where the comet's ready to burst. It's practically made of this base. Now, the good thing about putting it into a comet, the reason I want to put it into a comet, is that comet's going to melt as it enters the atmosphere, and hopefully put a little mist in the sky too. Well, when it finally melts, the base is distributed. I mean, you want a big freaking comet. You want something that when it blows, it's going to cause a nifty little reaction. My vision is that this thing gets about halfway through the atmosphere, and you see an electrical and firestorm when the comet finally does melt. You can see for miles in space. When it's all said and done, you reduce the atmospheric pressure by about, 60% ish, and then you all the while you've eliminated most, if not all, of the acid in the atmosphere, to the point where maybe you could even see the surface of the planet. As of right now, you couldn't, and so there's another problem with Venus. How is that you're going to get it to rotate? It takes a full year for it to make a full Earth year to make one daily rotation. Well, here's, like I said, you want this comet to be pretty friggin' big, probably about half the size of our moon. My thinking is, as it approaches the planet, the gravitational stress and possibly even the impact with the atmosphere might, I'm hoping, be sufficient to tweak it a little bit. Now, my theory is you're probably going to have to hit this planet a few times before, and I'm sure it would be more, it would probably take about a century of bombardment. But it's doable, and the planet itself is the size of Earth. So, as the years go on, you dump more and more comets into it, more and more water. It gets closer and closer to being a habitable world, until finally You just you start leaving people and plants on it. Now I've established the how, the why, the where. I guess the when would be as soon as possible. Why not? Like I said, it's not getting any less crowded. It's not getting any less complicated. Um, and it's not like it would hurt. It would not hurt to be a three planet species. And again, I think it would be very good for our economy. Let me know what you think, and thank you.